Hey everybody, welcome to Soapbox. Today we have Daniel Rekshan joining us, and we are going to discuss some UAP disclosure sort of stuff, hopefully from a wider lens and a more open mind than maybe some of the more mainstream sources. We're going to get into the minutiae of a lot of that stuff. And Daniel, why don't you tell people what you do and what you're into?
Sure. I'm mostly into dreams, extraordinary dream states, lucid dreaming, and then exploring consciousness from a variety of angles. I am classically educated from St. John's College. So that's studying the great books of Western civilization and talking about them. That's philosophy and things like that. Then I have a master's degree in East-West psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies. Integral studies is interesting because it looks at like Eastern spirituality from a Western psychological perspective. And so that's what the degree is in. It's an East-West psychology. It's an academic program. So it gave me a lot of skills in looking at cross-cultural kind of things, worldviews. And during that time, I focused on dreams. I looked at how do people work with dreams, what is impactful about dreams. During that time, I was having out-of-body experiences. I was doing shamanic work. I was having all these sorts of dream phenomena happen to me. And so that drove forward my academic understanding. During that time as well, I got a certificate in depth hypnosis. So I became trained as a hypnotherapist, although I didn't start practicing full time or anything like that until around 2020. So 2020 happened, pandemic happened, and started thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I'm a software engineer. I need to do something different. This world's going crazy. I know I need to look into the UFO abduction syndrome, missing time, and I need to serve as a hypnotist. I need to offer dream work and hypnosis sessions to people who have lost an hour or 8 or 2 days to think is space alien, right? So that is really what cued me off to this track that brought me to talk to you guys, talk to the magical path people. I studied Enochian magic as a way to understand what this sort of stuff is. And I've since written about four to six books, depending on how you look at it, all about these different topics. I was or am a PhD student in the Integral Noetic Science program at the California Institute for Human Sciences. And so that's a PhD level program. It's the first accredited program anywhere to credulously study extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence contact. So that's kind of claim of fame, sort of like the first person in the academic world accredited to say, hey, I'm explicitly looking at ET contact and dreams.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that's how I got in contact with Brian, and we've explored these topics together from a couple different perspectives.
Man, I have so many questions.
Great.
I knew Kurt would be
Dive
excited
in.
about this chat
Okay,
once we get into it.
first, Noetic, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, I've heard of that. Uh, who founded that?
So that's Institute of Noetic Science is related but different than the Integral
Okay, okay,
Noetic Science program.
okay,
The founder is this is related though because the Institute of Noetic Science was founded by Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut that went
okay,
Apollo 14 astronaut. He had a mystical experience in space, came back and started studying consciousness. So then he developed the Institute of Noetic Science. He also funded the free Foundation for Research into Extraordinary and Extraterrestrial Experiences. They did a large scale survey of experiencers and published that data in 2017 or around then, 18. And that was one of the first major academic studies after the 1990s alien abduction stuff. So even
Mm.
then, we're seeing this kind of there's a culture here in like in the West, California, the integral noetic thing that's actually looking at these experiences. Yeah.
okay, okay. Yeah, because I know I had heard the term before, but that's a interesting detail. Uh, Second question. So you've talked about you were just saying that you've also had out of body experiences. Do you consider them on kind of a gradient of dreaming from standard dreaming to lucid dreaming to out of body? Because there's a lot of I've played with the Gateway experience, the Gateway tapes, and there seems to be a lot of overlap, or no one's given me a clear explanation of like, are they different? Are they the same? Are they kind of variations of the in your how you experience them? Would you say they're an extension of dreaming, or are they kind of their own uh, experience? I would say.
Yes, that's a great question. There's experientially, I say they are a in within the spectrum of dreaming. And the
Okay.
reason why I say that is my definition of dreaming is very mystical. And I go, we're living in a dream right now. That's the kind of fundamental mystical thing that we'll get to, and that kind of circles around is like this is actually a kind of a dream state of the sleeping God or whatever. And so we're
Mm,
all parts of that. That said, the definition of dreams that we are usually familiar with is a very limited definition. So we talk about little dreams often in our culture. So these are dreams that it's like you ate a roast beef sandwich and you're worried about work. And so you have a nightmare and then you wake up and you can't interpret it or you might have forgotten it. That is what we think of as dreams in Western culture. That's technically the monophasic bias. This is a term from dream shamanism. Monophasic
mm,
bias meaning the culture only cares about one phase of consciousness. So we need to expand that to a polyphasic understanding where we care about multiple phases of consciousness. And then when we do that, or when we look at cultures who do that, we see that people go, oh, there's big dreams and little dreams, and like noetic dreams and just everyday dreams. And so that already gets us into this kind of spectrum. Um, and the final thing I would say about that is there are, even in dream studies literature, like they have to define dreams in terms of spectrums. And that's the best definition of dreams I've encountered. They use about three different spectrums from waking to
mm.
sleeping. They go, dreams happen all the time. You can have them in waking time, in between, whatever, in REM, it doesn't matter. So there's a spectrum of what the content's like, spectrum of how much you recall it. Um, and the absolute final thing I would say is when we dive into what dreaming actually is, it
Mm.
seems to me to be the function that creates the lived experience of reality. It's not the bizarre things that happen at night. It's the function that takes sensation and generates a world out of it. And the thing
Mm.
that's changing overnight is where and how that sensation is coming into that system.
Ah,
Mm.
I love that because then the dreaming unfolds within it regular waking consciousness as well, and it opens the cracks the door to like open the conversation up to, well, that's not really regular. There really is no regular. Like, you could have eaten roast beef instead of a salad for lunch, and you're in a different state of consciousness than you would have been had you had the other thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I really like that. It's the sense making, the world that you build out of the inputs that are coming. Uh,
Eh, yeah, so when you're asleep, uh the overwhelming inputs of the body kind of shrink, right? So then the I guess it sounds like what you're saying is like then actual reality starts to get revealed more, maybe
hmm,
is possibly a way to look at it.
Yeah, depending on how you see that, right? So our
Yeah.
lived experience in the testimony says yes, actually, it becomes the domain of sacred contact. It becomes a domain where knowledge of the world that can be beneficial to the community is revealed. That's what
hmm,
happens. It's like when our senses turn out to the outside world, they tune into a source of wisdom that's generally beneficial to us if we work with it in a way. But
Mm.
we need to be actually acculturated, or we need to work with it more than we have in the West. And that's why magical practices, I think, are meaningful. I think everyone's intuitively doing it on that side of things.
that makes so much sense, even thinking about how if you just sit still long enough, you end up in trance. You end up being able to kind of work in the spirit. And you don't have to do much except limit the sensory inputs that you've been getting into your body. So it almost seems like once the body it starts to quiet down a bit, then the mental processes expand to help as the inputs that are plugged into the reality making dreaming capacity, the world building dreaming capacity. And so then once you're able to either have a still mind or clear out a lot of your echo chamber stuff, then that's when it's quiet both in the body and the mind, that's when things seem to open up to like outside sources more easily.
Or even, I mean, this is all, this is really, it's cool because it's basically the meditative state is a willed dreaming state,
Mm,
kind of, is what we're, and in fact, it's you can dial stuff down and then dial things up because often, particularly sound will have a overwhelming effect on those sensations and the state that you're in. Uh, But I imagine you could probably do that with most any sense. You could probably tune the rest down and dial up visual, audio, taste, I don't know, smell possibly, who knows. And you would reach different states of experience. Is kind of what it sounds like to me.
Exactly, yeah. So we were talking about the experience like gateway tapes and binaural beats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the sense here, when I look at the literature about going into trance and hypnosis and generating those trance states, it looks actually very easy to generate hypnosis states. You
Mm.
read a script to people and that's it, right? Like, you invite them to relax and then their minds start doing that thing and it starts working with whatever's there, especially suggestions. So especially suggestions and sensations, right? You can really setting an intention, really do impact psychedelic trips in the same way they impact these states. And so that was the thing that's shocking to me in the getting into this is actually is very, very common for people to go into these trance states to have fantastic experiences that they get confused about. It leads to amazing stuff. And so that's one of the insights I have with the alien abduction conversation or the UAP disclosure stuff is there a lot of that relies on testimonies derived from dreams or hypnosis or people who have been influenced by those things. And so they go, wow, you go into hypnosis and there's this rich world that's consistent and it seems like you can share it with other people and there's other people bringing testimony back from that world and that world seems to impact my body in real ways and radiate lights in this way and all this stuff is happening, but it could really just be a natural human faculty to go into those states of meaning making that are deeply connected to the whole world around us. And we just don't know in Western science points of view. And we think that the the missing time regression for extraterrestrial abduction stuff is actually it. When in reality, that's a special type of a general function you guys practice all the time with spirit communications. But the scientists don't actually have any experience of that. So they go, oh, okay, this seems so real. It's got to be real. Therefore, space aliens are abducting people instead of coming to the conclusion that we have a natural human faculty to engage in a third space, a third reality, the imaginal realm.
Mm.
yeah. And the scientists don't ask us because we don't know what we're talking about.
That's right. That's right. So it's such a conundrum. It's such a conundrum, and that's in part why the integral studies perspective. That's why my academics have been really interesting to me because that's one of the places within academia where it's self-reflective, and they go, okay, we have to actually look about how we're thinking about things. Now, whether or not integral studies is accepted in the wider mainstream culture is yet another question. So we'll see. So,
Uh, they just
Oh,
want to keep the fun stuff away. That's basically what
right.
they're.
hey, we talked about that a lot last time too. How I think it's like you're saying, it's partly a lack of experience and a lack of philosophical container to hold what they're trying to explore. Um, but then there's also like the layer of of intentionally wanting it to seem like one thing or another, or just to muddy the waters so much that no one has any kind of foothold in reality concerning these things.
Yeah.
Are just are overemphasizing the material and physical, and that if something is not that, then it's basic, I guess, fluff. I don't know, or at least, or it just doesn't. It's not in the model, so it doesn't matter.
But that's the thing. It's like, how can anyone actually be an experiencer and still be nuts and bolts? To me, it seems like the nuts and bolts people are the ones running around who like haven't had contact yet, and they're just, for the most part, probably still seeking after something they're curious about.
Either that, or they're ignoring it.
Yeah,
Like they might, their worldview may not even allow them to see, like, because what you do learn from magical practices, it's often little subtle things that sort of build up, and you start to understand, oh, there's activity here, but but the nuts and bolts view is very, like, that's a very like narrow reality tunnel to live in, that doesn't allow anything outside to percolate in, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's my experience working, so like supporting the abductees basically, or the contactees and things like that, is they are people who have experiences. So I believe there is a unacknowledged natural human phenomena of contact with what has been termed non-human intelligence as aliens or angels, but this is actually, I believe, a special dream phenomena that sometimes has physical effects, but it's indigenous to humanity, and you're dealing with your higher self or whatever. It's parts of the vast system that is human. It's not necessarily extraterrestrial. So I believe that's happening. Um, oh man, I lost the train.
or at least the system that humans are connected with. Like,
Oh
and I
yes.
think that system is vastly bigger than our own it's like just opening us up to the fact that there are conscious, intelligent beings everywhere that we just can't see. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah. But
Yeah.
that is the most terrifying thing for an apex predator to learn.
Yes, so those things, that's where I was getting to, that those things are happening across the board, whether or not you acknowledge it or whatever, whether or not you think you're the apex predator or you realize where you are in the system of the hierarchy of the great chain of being or whatever. So that's the thing that that's what drove people to work with me, is a sense of obsession. So it's a sense of obsession or tension within themselves. They have a deep intuition and knowingness as to what happened in those encounters,
Mhm.
but they cannot integrate that in their worldview or their waking life. And they actually literally just need to talk to someone oftentimes, to tell their story, to be listened to and not ridiculed, then to have a space where they feel safe enough to encounter the inner intuitions, the imaginations, the imaginal stuff associated with that, to look at it, to listen to it in this way through the documentation or whatever we do through the hypnosis. Then it's enough for them. They process, they're like, oh, okay, like now this thought feels much better. It's sort of like they get rid of a lot of the emotions that kept it repressed, is the sort
Mhm.
of feeling. Um, the thing about that's different about my work than any other hypnotist is I hold it as shamanic dream work, and the result isn't understood to be a historic memory that's recovered. So I do education around false memory and the difference between hypnosis and dream work, or the or that hypnosis is actually dream work, shamanic dream work, that's misidentified, and I talk about that. So that's how I'm different, and that's why these materialist people can have these immaterial experiences, not understand them, feel this tension that drives them to look at the psyops and stuff like that. That's why that psyopy thing is so entrancing to people, is because they go, I really want to figure out what's happened to me. These people out there are talking about psionics, or they're talking about UFOs, and they're associating those things, the UFOs, the nuts and bolts craft, with the actual lived experience of contact. So that's the thing, there's a whole complex of things happening there. And the thing that I understand from my work is that humans are both rational and irrational. So part of you like, okay, it should totally make sense, but like you behave like a crazy person if you've been terrified of alien abduction since you were 3, and so you don't even want to think about it because you saw a scary like ET or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind or movie or whatever. And so you've got all these 3-year-old complexes that keep you away from it. And so then they play those like piano or whatever. The psyops play those fears and start to control you in these irrational ways.
Interesting. So it's basically like there's already a cultural bucket for this stuff that is basically fear-based.
Yeah.
So they have this experience and then they take it and they're like they have no context for it. So that's where it ends up going.
Yes, yeah, and that experience itself, the experience of contact is co-creative and based in part on the contents of social imagination. Like
Hmm.
people have pointed to say, hey, the aliens look like the space science fiction aliens. You recover that in hypnosis, and people spend a long time figuring out when this came out in that media and when the person in hypnosis said that, and is it actually science fiction or not? No matter what, it always uses science fiction and imagination in the
Hmm.
experience. That's my understanding. And there's a reality beyond that that transcends the false real duality here. And so you have to get to that deeper understanding, but it's co-creative, meaning it brings your setting and intention. And oftentimes when you're a kid, like when I was a kid having these experiences, I didn't know what was going on. So I just made sense of it the way that was present to me, and that was through spooky alien abduction stuff. So instead of going, oh, I'm a someone who can talk to the angels and this is a for the benefit of my community because probably 1 out of 10 people in the world can do this sort of thing, and you just do it because 1 in 10 are really good like lumberjacks, so it's a really good trade-off or whatever. Instead of doing that, I went, oh my God, I might be an alien abductee. They're stealing my body and raping me in weird ways, and I should be terrified of my dreams, and there's nothing I can do about it. And so that
Hmm.
created complexes that made me shut down these sort of faculties for 2 decades or whatever. And that's why
Oh
I'm
wow.
talking about psyops and other things, because I believe there's ultimately a phenomena of angelic contact or alien contact or whatever you call it. But I believe it's obscured by these lenses that create a state of fear and panic and disempowerment. So I become very concerned about when we use terms like unidentified or non-human or extraterrestrial or alien, because it leads us to believe these special phenomena like teleportation or radiation of celestial lights or miraculous healing or prophecy, those are the domain of alien activity on nuts and bolts craft instead of our activity as natural human magician people.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, in a lot of our circles, people use the word other, like as in the way you would other someone in a group and make them feel like they're outcast. In that same kind of sense that something is so foreign that the only attribute you can actually apply to it and still be certain to be honest is just other. And so like there are obviously cases where it's like, well, I called an angel, so I know it's an angel because we've met before and blah blah blah. But there are cases where it's like I have no idea what that was. I know how they were. I know how they were with me. I know what they did. I know the interaction and what it meant. But like to try and say like what they are, it's like I wouldn't even do that with like a close friend. It's like it's rude to put another being with agency in a box of that kind of label because you don't know if that's just like the human conception of that and what is that based on, like the image that they pulled from your own mind and fed back to you so that you could have something to engage with or um yeah, I think the amount of assumptions that get made, like you said, because there isn't the framework within us. So it does just get kind of thrown in that pail or that bucket that's been provided and actually kind of forced onto you. Um, yeah, I think that's really important. And I think with what you're saying about hypnosis and how it's co-creative, if you're I can't imagine knowing what I know and my own experience with trauma, and if you go into a hypnotic regression session with only the framework in your mind of nuts and bolts, then like you're just re-experiencing some horrific thing that happened to you in real life without your consent. And like uh I feel like the that is damaging. But like exploring it like a dream is like it's automatically it's a dream. So it's an experience I had, but it's the part of your mind that needs the nuts and bolts thing is can like rationalize it into a box of like it's safe. It's at a distance. It's not going to murder me tonight when I sleep because remembered it today. Um I don't know where I'm going with this or if it's a question, but
I mean, it's a really big question. Is like how to approach the regression session. These people literally have they don't they often there's like a blind spot as to what happened to them, but there's a complex of symptoms like body marks or memories of UFOs and intuitions of contact, and they are people who like encounter this media and they know for certain they go something happened. I know it for certain, but then they push it right down and they go like, maybe it happened to me. I'll have to find out. I'll maybe take the quiz online. Am I an alien abductee or whatever? And then eventually, oftentimes people have one regression session before me and they are confused by it and they start talking to me or something. And then so there's this whole thing about how to like yeah, the reliving of the trauma, right? Like people talk about the trauma of this thing. Um, is a really complicated topic to talk on. That's why I'm sort of, what am I, how do I approach this? But when I started practicing, so that was one thing that I was really nervous about is the actual objective nuts and bolts interpretation of this. They said, if I'm actually working against alien mind control of alien doctors who have come here and implanted hypnotic suggestions that these people forget this stuff. If I'm reversing those, won't they be mad and come after me? Like that was an actual question I had, and I I I actually looked at the field of hypnosis, right, and you can see that the testimony of the experiencers are qualitatively different between hypnotists, right? So from David Jacobs is a little bit different than Bud Hopkins, different than John Mack. These are all famous 1990s abduction researchers. But then if you compare those old white guys to some women, it's really different. It feels different. The quality of it feels different. The experience, the healing of it feels different. How what's even possible is very different. So
Mm,
the intuition I had when I started practicing was, what if the hypnosis session actually impacts the objective events of the missing time thing? Like, what if the missing
mm,
time event was just
mm,
a smear of possibilities? It's like a wave probability function, and that the hypnosis session collapses that of a dozen possibilities or a thousand into one thing that actually happened, which is
mm,
the encounter with, I don't know, Zeta Gray aliens or beautiful light beings who tell you that everything is love. And that's the difference. And so
Mm,
then I go, if I navigate that possibility from these doctors stealing your eggs and sperm to everything is love, and this is a self-revelation of that sort of God idea, mystical God idea, then what would happen? How would these people's lives be different? Would they find more peace? Would they be able to connect with their own magicality and things like that? And the reports I get from working with me is, yeah, actually, they're more connected to that. They're less intention around what am I actually a victim of something, and they feel
mm,
more empowered. There's
mm,
oftentimes not that much more insight about what happened to them physically. Like they go, I don't know, right? Like we might do in terms of, I don't know how this magic stuff works. I don't know how the angels visit. I know it's real, and I actually have an intuitive sense of how it works, meaning how I can mediate those experiences for benefit in my life and the community, but I couldn't tell you objectively how they're caused.
mm.
yeah.
Um, so okay, that's really interesting. Is that like so when you're working with someone, how do you, because I know there's like a whole thing with like that was a controversy about these regressions was like polluting the the experience or whatever. So so how do you approach it so that it like are you trying to still be neutral while bringing these in and then it yeah, I guess that's my real
It's a
question.
Yeah, that's great. That question comes about from an understanding of how hypnosis works. So the sense of
Mm,
polluting, they talk about it in terms of leading questions. This is hypnotic suggestion that causes false memory. That's
mm,
what it is. It's a hypnotic induction that causes false memory. That's what we're concerned about. I am specifically concerned about harmful false memories of alien abduction because we know, like, there's studies that show if you adopt a harmful memory that says you're a victim of trauma and you didn't actually experience the trauma, your body responds as if you actually did, if you have
yeah.
that false memory. So that's what I'm really concerned about here. I go, if that is actually happening with people who go through these types of experiences or research about these experiences, which can also cause false memory, then that's an issue. So I've taken those concerns from the 90s and amped them up because of work related to Chris Bledsoe that we'll talk about, and studies and things like that. But um, to work with that sense of the controversy, it it starts with an understanding of hypnosis that I say is monophasic understand. There's a biased understanding about hypnosis that says it can recover memories, objective memories, and it says that's the primary way that's the primary use of hypnosis in this case would be to recover memories. That's what it is about. But actually, that sort of implies there's an objective historic record in your mind that the hypnosis session can be objective or neutral. I say that's actually impossible. We're dealing with human
Mm,
beings that have nonverbal communications. The whole leading question thing is just a whole it's just a moving the goalpost down the field a little bit so you can't pay attention to it. It's actually people are suggestive even if you don't use any leading questions. You can suggest them. I literally hold questions in my mind for people who are in trance, and they answer those questions. Like they pick up on the very specific questions. I'm like going like, God, they're just going on and on and on, right? Like or whatever. I need to ask this question, and then they respond to it, right? Like, and then I go, okay, that's cool. There's a non-dual interaction there. And even John Mack from the 90s acknowledged, hey, this looks way more non-dual than anything else. And so we have to
mhm.
be careful about it. They didn't have the sophistication to talk or write about it back then in the 90s. And I think through integral studies and things like that, we have way more sophistication in terms of talking about it. So the way I approach it, I go, this isn't actually hypnosis. This is actually shamanic dream work. And through
Mm.
my consultations and through a lot of my writing, I take people on that journey from this is recovering your memory to actually this is a natural experience of shamanic dream work that you're already empowered to do by the fact you're human.
It kind of seems like hypnosis has been at its foundation almost mislabeled from the start. Like, like it, this makes so much sense to me because this basically reframes a hypnosis session as a group ceremony.
Yeah.
What?
And
Okay. Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, like if you do a ceremony, whether it's hypnosis or magic, and you're running through like something in your mind and you're co-creating a situation, like that is the magic. Like that is what you're that is it. It's the same thing. So I also really liked what you said. Don't forget what you were gonna say, Kurt. I love what you said about the like so like a wave, like a wave that hasn't been collapsed of its possibilities yet. It's almost as if there's just a thing was scheduled to happen to a person to snap them into a wider reality, and it happened. And then like if they don't have a memory at the time, it's still in this state of malleable, and it's kind of up to them to finish the co-creation and to like add their own spin. And if that's full of fear, then it will be a terrible experience. Um,
That
yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Um, I what you were talking about made me have a realization about hypnosis, and I'm really curious about this. Is part of it as being the therapist, are you also hypnotizing yourself to get you in a state to then match? Is it basically like both of you, you and your patient together, are reaching are reaching a container are a different state together. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. It makes sense to me. And just to clarify the language, so I'm certified as a hypnotherapist, but I'm not a therapist. I have academic
Oh,
degrees
okay.
in
Okay.
psychology, but I'm not a clinician,
A
right?
clinician.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
and this is actually a really important distinction because people have used hypnosis in clinical settings, right? So there's a very special type of hypnosis has driven our language around it. It's clinical hypnotherapy or clinical hypnosis that veers into forensic hypnosis. But this is very, very different than the type of hypnosis that's been used in service to experiencers. Every
Mm.
once in a while, there's a professional like John Mack, Leo Sprinkle, or a couple other guys in abduction that are trained in both, or trained in clinical hypnosis and psychiatry, and they bring language in. And then the amateur hypnotist like Dolores Cannon, she's literally an amateur hypnotist. She was not trained. Same thing with Bud Hopkins, not necessarily trained in an official way. They turn to clinical hypnotherapy. They use the language because it elevates their dialogue, but they don't know what they're talking about in those ways.
Mm.
They just don't. And so this is where the greatest confusion in alien abduction and UAP disclosure comes in, is because everyone turned to John Mack's credentials to go, are these people crazy or not? Is this a dream or not? Can we interpret hypnosis as memory or not? And John Mack had zero education in clinical hypnotherapy. He was trained by Bud Hopkins, but John Mack happened to be the head of Harvard psychiatry. So, by a quirk of the tricksterness, he was trained by in hypnosis by Bud Hopkins, who had zero training. He was later revealed to be very unethical about his hypnosis practice. But at the
Mm.
same time, John Mack had an office next to Deidre Barrett, who has been the president of the International Association of the Study of Dreams. She's written papers on dream incubation and hypnotic dreams. So she's sitting there, this woman next to his office with all these studies that would have been directly relevant to the abduction stuff, but him as a white man, head of Harvard psychiatry, then later abduction researcher, he knew exactly what he was talking about. Because he was the clinician or whatever. And so that sort of confusion around language and things like that created a lot of confusion in our culture now. And that's some of the confusion I seek to remedy. And
Mm.
it's because there's a couple different hypnosis styles. So I firmly practice the kind of shamanic dreamwork style, the sort of amateur hypnotist in the style of Dolores Cannon or Bud Hopkins. I read through clinical hypnotherapy literature to know what they're talking about and to know actually is an important legal issue. It's an important legal issue because if we make medical claims, that gets us into trouble because of that liability issue of creating harmful false memories. So this is
Mm.
a huge issue for me. It should be a huge anyone doing work in the field.
Mm.
But I do enter into a trance state. I enter into a magical trance state. It is absolutely I believe it's both a natural capacity for someone to engage with another person in this way, but the specialization that I hold, like doing it day in, day out, I think is actually a psi capacity that I've developed through years of practice.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So trance state would probably be the better language to use, like entering trance states. And so uh, part of the creating the container is that you and your uh, the person you're helping both together enter that trance state.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And we both hold an intention together, and I build rapport with them to use the language that they understand to create that safe and sacred container. So that's
Mm.
why I talk a long time, like I do long consultations, I do long interviews, and then I do a session usually. I can't remember, Brian, how we did it, but I mean
Yeah,
we build rapport, right?
we had a full session's worth of just chatting first, and because you wanted to sort of build a language model around like
Yeah.
how the terms that you had in your head for certain things and you matched them to mine so that there was no confusion. I thought that was like a really cool part of the process, which like coming from your background and my background, like it was something that in like other shamanic sessions I've had or spirit work sessions, has not been a thing. And I just think it's interesting because it kind of should be, because even if you're both magicians, you very well might have like totally different terminology for the same things. But yeah, I appreciated that.
How does this? Well, see, now we might get off track. I'm curious how this, like, how does this relate to, like, say, like Milton Erickson and then NLP, which sort of descended from him, kind of. Um, because they talk about building rapport and a lot of that stuff, and I don't know if those are similar techniques or what. Like, oh no, you're frozen.
Sounds like you're back. Thanks.
Okay, yeah,
I'm on Starlink. Every once in a while, the satellites go behind the trees, and I can't hear anything, and you can't hear anything. I come back after about 5 seconds. So,
okay.
that's what's going on. You were talking about how Milton Erickson's techniques might work in and things like that.
Yeah, Milton Erickson, and then NLP, which I think is descended from Milton Erickson, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because it's they talk about similar things like building rapport, and I don't know if it's. I actually have a couple of things I've looking at an LP. Like there's in an LP they have that thing where like you can tell if someone's lying by like where their eyes go or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, oh, I think you're just giving them triggers to let you know when they're lying. You're telling them, oh,
Yes.
when you lie, look up this way. So the whole thing, like that's part of the trance state. Yeah.
Yes.
And there, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. NLP has a similar history as like hypnosis in service to this, meaning it
Mm.
veers from scientific to non-scientific to pop stuff and back again. So there's an echo between the academic kind of scientific work that's published in literatures that informs a kind of more folk practice, and then that comes back again. So there's was informed by Erickson in the trainer that I worked with worked with Erickson's stuff, and that's kind of common in training fields. So that's sort of in is informed. At this point, I've sort of looked what is actually hypnosis, what is specific things, and generally, it's a process of just inviting relaxation through suggestive scripts or something like that.
Mm.
Yeah, and so there it's a little frustrating. It's kind of like holding sand to try to grasp onto what actually is going on.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, uh, well, why don't we dive into so what do you okay, you wanted to talk about Chris Bledsoe and his experience specifically. Um, I guess how did you first find out about him and what what was your initial reaction?
Yes, okay. So what I want to talk about Chris Bledsoe, just to give you the context, is pretty huge. I look at his case as an example that we can track to identify psyops in UAP disclosure and truth behind that. So, what is the actual truth? So, I will raise concerning claims that he cannot discern between satellites and orbs, and that there's issues related to that lack of discernment when applied within an academic research context. So, he's the primary case study and advisor to the wiser experience or study that's happening at the institute I'm at. So this is the literary ground and the official ground by which I'm raising my concerns. And I've done so to the president, the provost, the deans of my school. I go, I'm concerned about this, and this is why. I've produced probably 300 pages of texts I've sent to them because of this concern. And I'm ultimately will say, there's a real true phenomenon there, and there's a layer of deception that's extremely concerning to me. So
Mm.
how I got there was I analyzed one of his most famous sightings, and that happened in 2023, I think, at the Monroe Institute. So you're familiar with the Gateway tapes. You're familiar with Robert Monroe, who has the Monroe Institute. You're also probably familiar that the government remote viewing programs have often used the Monroe Institute as a training place, as a retreat for psychic spies to develop their skills. So Chris Bledsoe went to an event that was organized by a man named David Broadwell, who's a U.S. government of housing policy analyst or something like that. It's weird, but he had experience with the phenomena that got him in contact with Colonel John Alexander, the I guess colonel who does psychic spying programs. He was the man. He was played by George Clooney in The Man Who Stare at
There's
Goats.
a Steros goats, yeah.
Yeah. So Broadwell talks to Alexander. They organize an event at the Monroe Institute for Chris Bledsoe to go there, have a CE5 experience. That's human initiated contact. He's doing a telepathic summoning of UFOs, and they decided to study him in those ways. I believe, I'm not sure, that his footage from that time has recently gone out on the History Channel, and there's like gadgets on his head and orbs going off or whatever. There's zero mention, I believe, in that of the sighting that's so important here. But so they organize an event. They call it the UAP Consciousness Connection Conference or something like that. The Lou Elizondo was supposed to be there. He sent Sean Cahill instead. There are academics, including my program director, there. And then they brought at least two other experiencers who had public testimony who seemed to be able to summon things in a documented way. One of those people was Dan Berg, who was my first client, missing time client. So in 2020, I did The Secret and I was like, you know what? I'm done with software engineering. I need to figure out the next steps in my life. And The Secret told me my destiny was to be a hypnotist in this way. So I said a prayer to be of service to others. And I was guided literally, like the next thing I know after the prayer, a voice said in my ear, Google C5, Rebel Soak, follow what's there. I found a crazy story about Dan Berg summoning UFOs to make ice circles in a lake. And then I followed what's there. And he has this amazing story of missing time. It's really is some of the best documented case of missing time I've ever seen. And he just was waiting for a hypnotist to walk into his life. He's like, I knew I needed a hypnotist. I just didn't know where to find one. So I just knew the aliens would send me one, and you're it. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. Like, how wild is that? Right? Like, literally after saying a prayer, like it was the 2 days, it was like a lot of stuff was so transformed immediately because of that prayer. And so we did session work together. He's the reason why I did Book of Galactic Light, which is my Enochian working. I did the Enochian working to make sense as to why Dan didn't accept our regression. So I did a regression with him. We got to the truth of it. We had an experience. He saw aliens in a ship or whatever during it for his missing time thing, but he didn't really accept it as truth. He just was like, oh, I don't care that much about it anymore. I don't have that tension or anxiety I used to have, right? Like, he's like, I'm not too worked up anymore. And he did connect with that field of love, that thing I was talking about. That was really important. So I went like, what happened here? Like, this is the best case of missing time. It's filmed. It's like amazing. This has so many great connections to like experiencers from North and South America. Like, it should be in documentaries on Netflix. I can't wait for that to happen. But why isn't it happening? And asking that question led me to do the Enochian working. That I made the Book of Galactic Light, and that led me to the Missing Time Found book, and then my other books came out of that. So any case, 2 years after that or whatever, Dan was invited to the Monroe Institute, and it had such weird energy. Like, I said prayers every single day for him. Every single day I would just like send energy and protection energy or whatever, like my wife would do. And he got back and it was really weird. And they said they saw a UFO, and it was certified by the director of MUFON Canada. It was said to be like passed through a NASA employee that said it was a UFO. It was definitely a UFO. Everyone said it was a UFO.
What does certified mean in that situation? Just for
Yes, right. So that's, I mean, it's not. It's so basically, this one sighting was written about in the book UFO of God, and that was endorsed by Colonel John Alexander and Jim Semivan. So they should have known, right? That literally the purpose of that event was to do government science upon UAPs. So they go, hey, it is a UAP. Therefore, they're implying actually government science is done. Their claims are being made by Chris Bledsoe after he had media training paid by David Broadwell to bring his story forward on these podcasts. That I mean, it's just nuts to me that they don't mention the fact that like what actually went on with this
Mm.
thing, and they pretend all the science is like, oh look, he's summoning the orbs. He's actually not. It's actually something else is going on, and they're constructing a story to make it look effective. And the reason why I say this is because I worked with that sighting, the Monroe Institute sighting, is the certification, right? It's the director of MUFON Canada did an analysis. He wrote a PDF. He slapped the MUFON logos on it. He talked about it. There was publicity from Rob Freeman. There was publicity from everyone around that yes, indeed, this is a UFO. Nobody knows what it is. The director of MUFON Canada did even, here's a PDF. It has a case file number, that sort of thing. So at this point, I go, 3 spy masters approve it. Director of MUFON Canada, he consulted with NASA. He
Mm.
like they wrote it up in a book. It's going to be a major motion picture. It's at the Monroe Institute. The government sciences were all doing it. Like there were academics, including my program director there. None of them are saying it's not a UAP. Everyone is going along with this story. So I went, oh my God, it's a UFO. It's got to have it looks like it's blinking at a regular pattern. That has to be a secret code from space aliens sent to Chris Bledsoe and Dan Berg. I know that. That's got to be the case. So I spent about 80 hours building open source software to analyze that footage, extract data from it, build a data visualization to a multimodal sound, sight, color for this blinking message, right? So I could decode it. And I went, this
And
is the
this is all under the assumption that these experts are correct
that's
and
right.
that they, people at assumingly NASA and spy masters you would assume that if anyone would know if there was a satellite or a plane or a giant spy drone or something, like they would know and they would be able to at least say it's false. Like
That's
it's
right.
not a UAP. It is identified.
That's
Um,
right.
okay, just making sure everyone's following at home.
That's exactly where it's at. And so at this point, there's somewhere around 10 people who are really official who have said, yeah, it's probably a UAP, including my program director who created the Integral Noetic Science program, Dr. Sean Esbjorn Hargens, was there at the event. Darren King, who is part of the Liminal Frames podcast, who's talking about this stuff, and from a philosophic point of view, was also there. So there's like academics, there's scientists, there's government people, there's public people, there's hidden people, there's all of this stuff. It was an event kind of tied to the Lou Elizondo stuff, right? Like, and so there's like Chris Mellon was said to be associated with it, sort of stuff. So there's like that was the best case. I thought it was a new Tic Tac. And I thought I was like Jodie Foster in Contact, having found a repeated signal based
Mm,
on math and geometry. This was a hypothesis I had from my dream work. It's like they can communicate through geometry. Therefore, I'm looking for it. I'm looking for case studies. I actually didn't look at that one. I looked at that one because I wanted to prove my case so I could ask for the footage of the UFO Dan saw during his missing time event. So this wasn't even the purpose. I wasn't even, but I was like, guys, look at this. This looks like an alien message. I was so excited. No, I mean, people responded to me. David Broadwell responded. Chris Bledsoe responded. They were initially excited. Then there was a dampering down of that excitement. And then I go like, guys, it's a thing, it's a message, it's a message, it's a message. They ignore me. Basically, I haven't seen anything. Like, wouldn't you share that information? Wouldn't you talk about it? Wouldn't you just inquire about it? Wouldn't you connect one of the government scientists with the PhD student who discovered and decoded an actual geometric message in the UFO? I would, but they didn't. They ignored me and they treated me like a weirdo. So I go like, why is that? Why is that? And it took me like a year
Why
and a
is a
half.
guy who summons UFOs treating me like a weirdo?
Yep. Why are all these scientist people like not paying attention to the fact that there's geometry in this thing. And so there was something wrong there. There's something wrong, and they didn't know what it was. It was the fundamental assumption that they were correct or authentic in their inquiry and conversation. And I got to that point when I went, you know what? I have to find other precedents for this. So I took the data I had, I looked for a precedence of that light, the light pattern, and I go, this looks like a geosynchronous tumbling satellite. Very easy. Like I found a pattern of that. I found it. It was named the Raguda 14 in a scientific paper about satellites. And I thought that was funny because it's the same name of a dream researcher who researched alien abduction experiences in dreams. And
Oh,
I
that's
love his
great.
paper. So there's ambiguity about whether or not those experiences are legitimate or whatever in his dream paper. So I went, you know, that's fun to be ambiguous about this. I'm going to leave this ambiguous and just see where these people go with it. And then eventually guidance said, no, you have to really clarify this. And so I contacted a government scientist who wrote his master's thesis on tumbling geosynchronous satellites. And he really helped me identify, no, that is truly a satellite, very likely Intelsat 29E. And he had a story about why it wasn't in the databases. And he had a very strong analysis about the quality of government scientists surrounding Bledsoe and MUFON Canada. Like you go and so he has a very strong email, strongly worded email about these things, very clearly identifying what it is. And I'm like, okay, so this is what really a government scientist is about. And that's not what's surrounding Chris Bledsoe whatsoever. And so there's an actual campaign of deception. That's my conclusion here. That's surrounding a very real experiencer, like his experiences. I will talk a little bit about why I believe those experiences are still legitimate and valid. But there's a whole function of disinformation and psyop thing happening that's being paid for by someone that is adjacent to the US government. So that someone that person's name is David Broadwell. Like I don't know. The Bledsoe has said, yeah, this guy's the manager of my story. He's the public manager. This isn't new information. I'm not outing anyone. This is public information like out there by Bledsoe and his family says that's the case. But when you look into who that person is, it's very suspicious. It's like, why is this the case? Um, so
Yeah,
I,
and to be clear, no one here is questioning the sincerity of Chris Bledsoe or his family in any way. Like I don't have any feelings of being deceived by them. I feel like they're some of the most honest people you'll find out there in this, but that does not mean that they cannot be taken advantage of.
Used.
And
Yeah.
the truth is always like slightly skewed. Whenever you're rubbing elbows with intelligence, the truth is always going to be a little skewed. It'll always be mostly the truth, but then they just change it just enough to get, that's just how it works. But I think this is such an important distinction that you've actually gone through the legwork of nailing down like Chris Bledsoe thought it was a satellite or thought it was a UFO. Everyone around him who should have been able to confirm that it was a satellite said, nope, it's definitely a UFO. And then, you can confirm, no, it's definitely a satellite, and they are all misdirecting here. So from there, I think a lot of people would immediately go, oh, well, so Chris Bledsoe's just a psyop too. Take it away.
yes. Uh, I had that sort of feeling. I mean, I had a whole journey personally around this, and the movement of my inquiry has been guided by my own dreams and my interactions. So
The only
my
source anyone should be trusting in 2025.
that's right. So I have dreams and I incubate dreams. They're oftentimes very cryptic and I send them to these people. So David Broadwell and Chris Bledsoe have a couple of inspired dreams from me. I go, this is the best case I got. This is the insight I'm having. Here you go. I'm taking the next step. Um, so there's a couple things to talk about. One is this the trickster function, the fact that the other side or whatever it is needs to take on the guise of something. So in a hypnotic session, people go, am I making this up or not? Am I making this up or not? It feels like I'm making this up. it looks like the aliens are what I saw in Stargate or whatever, right? Like shouldn't I be making that what that sort of thing. So people have that kind of idea that they're making stuff up in hypnosis, but there's actually something ultimately true about the hypnosis and meaningful. And so my understanding is that that real thing communicates through imagination. The imaginal communicates through imagination, and you cannot separate the personal imagination from the collective in the dream work, right? So in dream work, in shamanic dream work, we have to interpret big dreams from little dreams. That's personal dreams from transpersonal dreams, and they're sort of like nested dolls. And so the funny thing is like, you know, you might have the deepest level dream there is where you're interacting with a deity in lucid dreaming states made out of clear light, but it actually can cascade up every level. And that dream might also have like edible complexes Freud would analyze. And that dream might also be composed of science fiction or whatever. So in that case, I have not seen evidence. I have not found evidence, physical evidence for the UFOs or the things that people talk about. But I found anomalies that have convinced people of the lived reality of these experiences. So that's important to understand. Is like, I don't know if any experience would resolve into objective information like I would expect Bledsoe's case to, but I know when I step back, I identify a pattern of people being in this state of non-duality, a state of confusion, a state of using imagination to understand the imaginal. And that looks very consistent with what Chris Bledsoe is doing. The other reason I say there's authenticity there and things like that is the regression he has shared is very similar to any regression I've done with anyone. So people often elevate his story of the lady or whatever, right? And actually, you can have direct interactions just like him. Like if you just relax and let this trance faculty go, right? Like it will lead you to the same type of stuff he's been led to. And the other thing, I mean, I track the geometry around things, like the geometry, and he has that geometry surrounding him in ways that make me go, doesn't matter if he misidentified it, doesn't matter if there's psychic spies around him. This is a thing that's happening for our entire culture, and we have to figure this trickster thing out. And he, in part, is the case study to do that. That said, there is this function of creating harmful false memories that lead to the physiological response of trauma that we could avoid if we were more careful about how we spoke. And that's why I raised my concerns with that within the context of academia, because that's one place that uses authority to create false memories. That's one of the side effects. That's like using the very sort of like history channels, sort of like sort of highly emotive, kind of non-scientific, but there's a lot of gadgets presentation. They invoke authority to create a sense of trust, and that trust leads to false memories and consolidation of these false belief patterns. I really have a concern about that, but ultimately, I'm very grateful for Chris Bledsoe's testimony and the stuff it's done in this world. Yeah.
I think what you were just saying happens like even if yeah, even if you don't mean to it seems very very tenuous. The yeah, I kind of left I think I just completely forgot what I was gonna say.
Well, it sounds like to me, well, and again, this is also like I when I the stuff I've watched of Chris Bledsoe, he seems like a genuinely authentic, honest person. So my assumption is that um, they're using him for their own ends. What those ends are, I don't know. The other thing I'd be curious about, so do you know for a fact that the footage you got is what was actually summoned? That would be the only other question I would have. Like, would they give you if they actually authentically gave something happen, would they actually share that? That would be my only other question about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Generally, my understanding of the people surrounding him and who are architecting whatever deceptions there are, my gut feeling is they are touched by the phenomenon themselves, like they have experiences and they want to know what's going on. They just
Hmm.
so happen to be intelligence community people who so happen to use deception as their trade craft, right? That's just how they work with the world. And so
It's
they're
their love
working with,
language.
yes, 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 absolutely. That's why that's in part I go like God, I'm now dealing with aliens who might abduct me if I like work against their mind control, and now I'm thinking about intelligence agents who might kill me if I speak against them. And I'm like, no, they actually really just care about the phenomena. They want to figure that out. And it's a little kinky or whatever. Um, so um yeah,
They're all Scorpios. That's
so the fact I mean so you asked like is it the right footage or not? I think so actually.
yeah.
Primarily you can listen to the conversation around there. I listened to the secret, Dan Berg's testimony around it. I've listened to Bledsoe's about it. I go and it's consistent with what they talked about.
Okay.
And uh,
You dropped out for a second. You're back though.
yeah, we're here.
Okay. So
The
you basically triangulated a lot of all the data around it, and it all said this is what you're looking at is what they were experiencing.
Yes, and I at this point I was heavily credulous. I was in the camp. I was in the cult. Drank the Kool-Aid. I was speaking their
Mm,
language. I was a confused person in the first funnel of the UFO disclosure cult. And
Yeah.
so I mean, they would give me those right, like that's kind of where I was at. Um so they were more open to me than I suppose they might be now, but I think ultimately like I'm advocating for the reality of the experiences they are and advocating for science to be done upon them in ethical ways.
I think a lot of the time when these sort of manipulations are done, they're kind of banking on their their psychological manipulation training. And so if you're someone who's in that first camp, the first layer of like disclosure reality, and they can tell that, then they're assuming that your desire to believe is going to float it, and you're not going to do your actual homework, right? Like I think that's probably the logic there. But what I think the most important thing that this illustrates is that like Chris Bledsoe can be a shaman and could be in a group of people, point to a fucking airplane and say, there's an orb. And if everyone agrees, then they will have an experience. And that experience is legit contact, even though the object pointed at is a hunk of metal and with humans inside. Um, because when you're in ceremony, sometimes the smoke becomes shapes and faces. That doesn't mean that it's not still smoke.
Yeah,
What it means is that ceremony changes reality, and the beings that communicate actually don't need necessarily a physical thing to be what it quote unquote actually is. And so I think that again we come back to the theory of mind that is disabling a complete understanding of like what is actually going on here and what is the important part, because it doesn't matter if there's really a thing in the sky. What matters is that someone was healed during that experience. What matters is that like someone's life changed in a positive way. And the problem with this is that it cuts off the whole UFO shit altogether and it just puts you back into shamanism, which people for some reason aren't ready for, but they're ready for an invasion, you know?
yeah. Yes. That's a good why that is frustrating to me. I don't know. Uh, yeah. I mean, ultimately, I mean the thing that I am concerned about is the that you can know that the smoke is ceremony, right? The and real. Like you hold that, but you hold that understanding through probably lived experiences of confusion and things like that. You've earned that understanding.
Yeah.
And most people haven't, and they trust blatantly. And so I get really concerned about like people who reach out to me, they get duped by people making promises about psychic giftings that they have control over. Or maybe Chris Bledsoe, because he's close to the lady, can reveal a prophecy about 2027 that will make a huge amount of people vote for warmongers that will send nuclear weapons to wherever in order to move this religion thing forward in this way. And it's just because of confusion, because they haven't earned the understanding that you have, and they're being taken advantage of. And the reason why I'm talking about it is because if people who have earned the understanding that you hold sort of talk about that to the people around them, then the kind of deception-y thing that might lead to manipulations for the purpose of war lose their power, but the actual miraculous healing thing can still happen because it
Yeah.
doesn't need the manipulation to happen. It doesn't need the confusion to actually, I mean, it does in a sense, right? We're always kind of pushing the boundaries in the ritual or ceremonial space in ourselves. Nothing's ever the same, but it's more empowering when you have the understanding that you're talking about, and that's where I get concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and like you were saying before, you can have similar experiences to Chris Bledsoe's. They don't have to be as intense. They might not be. They might be. It might lead up to intensity, but like clearly, whatever the lady is, like I personally have I have personal reasons for believing that that being is real and cares about him. Um, But that doesn't necessarily mean that someone who's interested in Chris Bledsoe's work, that that's the right being for them to go to. And if it is, maybe you don't need to go through someone for that. Like it's cool. Like we all need, sometimes we need to go, on an adventure, on a journey that brings us to a level of capability, like of experiencing more. Because if we're sort of grandfathered into the weird, then we can approach it easier on our own later. So I get that. But like you're saying, it's such a danger. Um, there's such a danger for the potential of even accidental gatekeeping, where like, oh, this person is special, and that means that I am inherently like not as special.
Yep.
But in reality, it's like really how much work have you done to open these things up, to really get into that minutia? Like people that often assume that they haven't done the work to actually figure out what they're capable of yet. It's just easier to assume, oh, well, just go over here to this person because they've got a line in, and um and
Well, and that
that's
oh,
cool with like that's cool with like normal everyday shit. But when it comes to spirit stuff, it's like you're using physical material reality logic on something that where that doesn't necessarily work. Sorry, Kurt.
uh, no, no, no. What I was going to say is that what you're talking about, Brian, is probably exactly the point of why they did all of that stuff around Chris Bledsoe. Is it's all like it's a control thing, right? It's like he is special, no one is. We have all this hullabaloo, and we're authorities on this. So listen to us. So it's another attempt at control
Yeah.
and and steering reality basically. Yeah.
Yeah, ultimately in my inquiry, and this veers towards speculation and intuition as opposed to anything else, because I kind of got sick of the inquiry, right? Like collecting all this documentation for something that's like maybe no one really appreciates hearing about. So I got enough documentation to move my case forward with the academic stuff, and I moved that far enough that my guidance was happy around that. Um, and losing the train of thought. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, yeah. So, um, control mechanisms, right? So we were talking about that. And so I had to understand like where does this go intuitively? What's my understanding on this? Is this evil or not, right? How do I relate with this? And my intuitive understanding, like I shared, was like Chris Bledsoe is an experiencer. That he's surrounded by intelligence community adjacent individuals that may have deep state psyop agendas or whatever, but they ultimately are there to manage and control. And my understanding or intuition around him, because it takes us or is a gateway from fundamentalist evangelical kind of Christianity ideas into this lived shamanism, kind of lived phenomena sort of thing, is that there's some control mechanism from the deep state or whatever who's using Chris Bledsoe as part of their control mechanisms they've been using since who knows when. Like they've got their hands and fingers in fundamentalist evangelical Christianities, and this is just yet another version of that. And so my understanding was there's nothing really in particular. They're not like they don't have a specific agenda here. They use whatever agenda is at the moment. They just end up controlling stuff through media narratives because that's the apparatus they have. And so it for me it sanitized this from the sense of nefarious kind of evil intentional thing to there's just a function of the state or intelligence community in control of religious narratives, and this so happens to be an emergent religious narrative that they are have some control of. And,
Well, that reminds me. I don't know if you've heard of Reed Wildermuth, but he's like essentially a magical political author. Um, he does some really cool stuff, but he had a piece on how I think it was as far back as the around the Reformation, or maybe I'm getting that wrong. But at some point, the the smartest, richest people that kind of controlled at least the Western world, um, they figured out that the biggest threat to their power was witchcraft.
mhm.
So essentially, the ability for the common person to interact with non-human intelligences for the sake of power and to cause change in the world.
Yeah.
And they realized that this was real, and they realized that this was the biggest threat to their power. So their solution to this was to create and invent the city state.
Hmm.
So the idea of countries with borders and the government, that came from as a way to protect against witchcraft. Why? Because the national identity can be then built up and played upon. And it's just really interesting that like this sort of impulse, this uh I want to say psychopathic, but like it's compulsive for sure. Desire to control. Um, it's to me that smells of like coming from some deeper, more insidious thing. And it's like it almost doesn't even have to know why it's doing it. It's just if there's something that can be controlled, like it needs to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. I mean, that sounds about right to me, to be honest. Right. But it gives me compassion around the people in the system, right? The David Broadwells I've mentioned, or like the Colonel John Alexanders, or the people in the deep states or whatever, where I'm like, these people, like they are engaged in the psyopy thing, and it is this mechanism of control, but we're all in it together, sort of feel it's like the way you described it feels almost like the archons reaching through empire, basically.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so right, right,
Yeah. Yeah, I just got an image in my head of like Philip K. Dick, like chain smoking three
yeah.
cigarettes at once, staring at the Roman Empire. Like, yeah. Um, there was other stuff I wanted to ask you too, but it's so rainy here today, and it's like the weather is in my head, and it's
Hmm.
like it's like I had all these ideas of what I was gonna ask you. Um, we've covered so much good stuff though. I'm trying to think like what we've talked about before.
Well, okay, if I may, um, so how do you feel about these new people that are getting pushed forward like
Mhm.
Jake Barber and their whole team, where they seemingly are also summoning things
Yeah.
and they have footage of it. Um, yeah, what is your just feeling and take on that?
Yeah, my take is that though, I mean, obviously it's a coordinated uh disclosure of whistleblower testimony. So it feels as if I've talked about the intelligence community adjacent individuals who are controlling these things. With Bledsoe, it feels very much similar to that.
Hmm.
The reason why I mean they sort of have a kind of similar languaging and they have a similar venue in podcasting. So I'm thinking about Blitch, Barber, Ramirez. Those are the three guys I'm thinking about recently who kind of they make the rounds. And the sense here is there is a movement of former government employees who are bringing forward UFO information, beginning with Elizondo. Then we have David Grush. Then there's Barber, you were talking about, and is slowly moving from nuts and bolts to psionics and remote viewing to pretty wild cases, right? So the Barber case is really interesting because the actual objective documentation we have is the egg video, right? That's what he brought forward, and it's like that
What
egg.
what's
Yeah,
interesting is that that's not actually his video. That is video Russ Coulthart had, and he tacked it in to that
that's right.
interview.
That's right.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of stuff, you go, huh, what's going on? And then if you look at like the psionic summoning and things like that, for me, my gut feeling is exactly the same as the Monroe Institute. It's the oftentimes artifacts of just anomalies or whatever. It's some
Crap.
catching up, catching up.
You might have to
So
repeat that. Okay, so it's artifacts and anomalies that they're
yes,
recording.
so that stance actually was talked about, that philosophic stance was talked about by Paul Devereaux in the Earth Lights hypothesis. So in the like 80s, in response to abduction lore, right, people are saying these things are UFOs or whatever. He says, no, actually, there's an indigenous form of dream shaman that takes the form of plasmoid light or
Hmm.
ball lightning, and it has an electromagnetic effect. And Michael Persinger, who made the God helmet to test this out, if you're familiar with the God helmet or anything like that, yeah, it's pretty wild. This is a pretty viable theory in my
That's
books.
how the God helmet got made because he wanted to test that theory.
I'm pretty sure, like, don't
Wild.
double quote me on it or whatever, but like, there's a high connection there. It's like in
That's
terms
cool.
of how that moved forward. So if he wanted, yeah. So that all there is there, right? Like, so there's this thing, and Devereaux says, no, it's all these things are just misunderstandings of natural phenomena most of the time. And I would agree with that, is this sort of this kind of perceptual play that opens the senses, right? Um, so that's my understanding of what the Barber Skywatcher thing is doing. I've listened to the testimony of the psionic contact that can summon these things, and it's very consistent with psychic medium stuff. They think they're controlling craft. It's like a RV remote viewing experience or whatever. It's nothing like, wow, I've done that sort of stuff, but I don't believe in the things I see in the sky as UFOs, right? Like, because you go actually analyze any of the footage or whatever, it will like just do that practice. I would recommend to anyone who's presenting footage alongside of that. That's very illuminating. Um, I can't believe that the people who control those narratives really believe the things on the tapes they're sharing are legitimate craft. I believe they are 100% UAP. They think they're UAP, or they're presented somewhat honestly as UAP, but that's a constructed language, is the intelligence community manipulation created by Jay Stratton to make money, move money around. So, um, I'm concerned and excited about this new movement towards psionics and stuff like that. because it is bringing in magical magical ways of thinking and being into this dialogue. That is in part related to the Matthew Brown testimony that recently went forward. Do you guys pay
Hmm.
attention to the UAP hearings and stuff? Like, do you
Not the
watch
hearings,
them?
but I like all of those people like Jesse Michaels, Russ Coulthart, yeah, Michael Brown, because he did that big interview on
Weaponized.
weaponized.
Yes.
Yeah, so and then he had that, you know, that Twitter post made a big deal because it had like an Enochian circle in it or part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, I know here and there, like I for my journey in this, like I was really into UFOs when I was younger, but they just scared me, and I'm like, I don't know why anyone would actually want to summon these things. This doesn't make any sense. It's not pleasant. So I sort of ignored it for a very long time. And then now my interest has been rekindled, and it's partway it's because of the direction it's going, where it does feel like they're in their own weird, fucked up way, they're trying to say that, you know, the world is much bigger than we want. Like that is the underlying structure to it. Um, and with the Jake Barber thing, I forget how I found out about this, but there was a book he recommended reading about the phenomenon called The Cosmic Pulse of Life. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book. It's really weird because like it's this guy, I can't remember the author's name, but he had done a whole series of infrared photos supposedly showing plasma entities or like the actual unities. And in that whole book is there's a whole talk about radionics, orgone generators, like there's all that stuff. And
Which Kurt and I think might be the dog whistle is just
well,
organ.
yeah, that's what I think the dog
Oh,
whistles
interesting.
might actually be, because there's a lot of people that think it's some sort of like audio thing, and I'm kind of like based on him recommending this book, I think it has something to do with that stuff. Like it's probably some weird orgone radionic cloudbuster thing that
Yep.
they're actually playing with. Um, now I forget where I was going with but yeah, there's some. Oh, that. Do you know when the term non-human intelligence emerged?
That's a good question. No, not I don't necessarily. I wouldn't. So I wonder that question too because I went through my own writing and I used the term extraterrestrial slash extra dimensional when I started writing.
Which
Um,
is, yeah, that's the original term. Yeah, and
oh, okay.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
everybody used to say, aliens, extraterrestrials.
Yes.
And now it's
Okay.
non-human intelligence, which that's an interesting shift in language because that's a broader that holds a broader scope.
It's even weirder because like when I first started actively leaning into like, oh shit, like always known spirits is real are real, but like actively leaning into that reality and becoming ceremonial about it was maybe 2018. And at that time, I joined Rune Soup and the everyone in the membership, like the community, was using the term non-human person.
Huh.
Like we were all using the term non-human person. And then slowly the UFO discourse like caught up and almost started using the same term. And I remember it setting off a lot of alarm bells for me because I'm like, is this the beginning of slowly revealing that we're not dealing with like is that the thing? Is it because that is the ontological shock, right? Is there are invisible conscious beings, right?
Yep.
Aliens that come here in a craft isn't the ontological shock. And that's something that oh, what's his name? Was just talking about on Spirit Box recently. Oh, I can't think of his name. But yeah.
So the free survey I mentioned, the funded by Edgar Mitchell,
Hmm.
they Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences. They started somewhere like 2015-ish. I can't remember exactly. They published around 2019, 18, something like that. Halfway through their study, this is a methodological issue for their study. They shifted from the term extraterrestrial to non-human intelligence. So
Hmm.
that's right when I would say all of the academics who are looking into it look to that study, and they all follow the cues from that. That's my understanding.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know where they got those cues from. The free study. I don't know where they did. Jay Stratton came up with the term UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, then unidentified anomalous phenomena. That happened in their work with the ATIP ASAP programs, the stuff that the 2017 New York Times article wrote about. And then I track also the word experiencer of the phenomena because that's such a vague phrase, right? I have found references in Dr. Mack's early 1990s work for that one.
Huh.
So this sort of sanitization of extraterrestrial language started back then in his support groups, I feel. They were like, if you're an alien abductee or experiencer of the phenomena, this was in I found record of it in his voice, his answering machine transcript message or whatever from the
Huh.
early 90s from the program that preceded Peer, which was Gray. He named it after Gray aliens, but then started using experiencer phenomena to sort of abstract it from those narratives. So that was early 90s. Um,
That's interesting because you're talking about it like you said the term sanitization, which in most cases, I feel like that is what's happening when language is broadened and made to sound more fancy and $5 word e. Um, but in this case, like the trend is actually de-nuts and boltsifying the language, which I find fascinating. That
yeah,
like the slide, whether or not they're still telling you it's we've got biologics and there's craft and we're doing recoveries, they're saying all these things same as they ever have, like basically. But uh now they're using terms to describe them which are legally unbinding in that way. Like you
yes,
could say this but mean a spirit and still testify before Congress.
yes,
And I think
that's it.
that might be part of it is legalities. I don't know. Not that they give a shit about the law anyway, so I have no idea really, but it could be that actual disclosure is just rolling back the veil of, scientific materialism as baseline reality.
I like that interpretation of disclosure. I think that will be a little bit co-creative. I don't, I mean, in terms of like that'll invite, like we'll have to step up to participate in that level of disclosure, which I'm all for. But the sense of disclosure of wanting them to reveal their documents or whatever in a truthful way, I'm never really super hopeful about. But
Well,
the sense that we can disclose
I
that
think it's more
this,
about damage control. Like if people are going to find out that materialism isn't true eventually, one way or another, then like we need to prepare their minds for not total breakdown. And like the terminology sinks into the subconscious and so then it's still a non-human person. So it still fits with the term I have. So I still have an anchor in my reality
hmm,
to explain this thing. So it's subtle, but it very well might be there just to prevent chaos for the expected uptick in these things as we, play God and try to predict the future with AI and blast holes in reality with hadron
yeah,
colliders.
yeah,
Well, even the term biologics is
Yeah.
like the thing that pops into your head is like, oh, it's a gray alien body, but that could just mean like we collected slime molds from
yeah.
satellites. I mean, that's again, it's very broad, and is including stuff that you probably wouldn't normally think about, you know?
Yeah, that's why I asked if you guys watched the actual hearings, the UAP congressional hearings or whatever,
Mm,
because there's been this sort of ceremonial language of introducing these things. And then the one that received Matthew Brown's testimony, the Immaculate Constellation document, right, it was like qualitatively different than the hearings before.
Hmm.
And the officials were like, are there are there hybrids? How do we make sense of this? What's going on? Like they were like re going through like the 90s abduction kind of quests and questions and stuff like that, and really wrestling and with these things. So I think it's fascinating now that on kind of the congressional record, there's officials wrestling with these terms or these ideas that are not as like nuts and boltsy as before. They're really much more kind of what's the nature of reality, and that felt
Yeah.
really. I was both like horrified by it because I know it's like a kind of construction, like people are the using Congress as a content creation vehicle or whatever to
Yeah.
push forward their worldviews or whatever. But also, I'm really excited about it because those worldviews are interesting and sort of, I am actually fascinated by the abduction ideas and the hybridizations and the stuff like that of the alien abduction stuff from the 90s. I think those are both scary, right, Kurt? I wanted to resonate with that experience of being scared by the UFOs and going like, why would anyone look into this and things like that, and
Yeah.
just comment a little bit, right? Like we probably watched similar stuff back when we were kids about UFOs. We were probably programmed by the same psyops, right? And that
Yeah, absolutely.
programming is being triggered in different ways, right? When like the different exposure you have to the words now UAP or whatever, or the stuff coming up biologics, you think of the grays. I think of the like we probably thinking of the same dissected pig stomach that was
Yeah.
reconstructed in Iran for this sort of thing to make it look like it was a lab and somewhere else. And it's probably that same image that convinced Kit Green to tell Robert Bigelow in a memo, this thing's real, right? Like, so it's like crazy to me that like the director of medical stuff in CIA could be employed by Robert Bigelow to look into that sort of thing, that one hoax that makes us think of that alien autopsy or whatever, and that word is being triggered for everyone that has been touched by it. So the fascinating thing that I found with a Matthew Brown tweet, the Sigalum de Ameth, right, was in part the reference to Enochian magic in an official UAP, whatever. Like it was so oblique, but the Enochian community, where that like I've been on podcasts with Enochian practitioners, we're all just like, thank God, finally, someone's paying attention to Enochian. This is now truth. It's like we're getting a lot of mileage out of that one tweet, and we're going to get some more. I'm going to EnochiaCon, which is the conference in a week of Enochian people that's coming together in Vancouver, and we're going to talk all about that. But it's a sense of programming, and we're responding to that programming. I think in part that fear that you have, it was the fear that I had that prevented me from looking into these things. And so I looked into these things in part to go, why am I so scared of these what seem like natural dream phenomena, these entity encounter states, the sleep paralysis, out of body? There was some edge of fear that did not feel personal to me. It felt like the cause was outside of myself. And as I tracked it, I go, oh, it's the narrative around abduction. It's the confusion around the role of hypnosis. It's the confusion about what humans actually are. And it's being triggered on purpose by this media that's had a deceptive appearance in media, in the like the New York Times article in 2017 is deceptive now. We can look back and go, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal knew they were dealing with psychic stuff. Luis Elizondo knew it was psychic stuff. They made an explicit choice to represent that in nuts and bolts. It was explicitly represented. We can demonstrate that by going back to Bigelow's documents, right? Like we can actually demonstrate it literally. So that deceptive communication in the New York Times was, in my experience, an event that triggered this programming I had from media about alien abduction that made me obsessed with this and made me go forward and do this work I'm doing now. It activated me in some way. And I don't think they were intentionally going like, all right, Daniel Rekshan, I'm going to make you an alien abduction hypnotist. But it
Yeah,
was
they don't have to.
yeah, they don't have to. Yeah.
It's the way that the mind works. Like I really appreciate Diana Pasulka's work. Like again, someone who's so deeply entrenched that I've no idea if I can actually trust, right? Trust is kind of like a luxury you don't have if you're into this kind of thing. Like it's a luxury you do not have access to. You have to learn to just operate in spite of that. And it's like whether or not she's manipulative or being manipulated, I like her and I
Yep.
like a lot of the things she says. But I love the work she's done on, or at least the work she's collated into one kind of cohesive idea about screen memory. And I know she pulled a lot from Jacques Vallée and others, but like screen memory and how, the mind gets imprinted with things that at the time you're conscious of the fact that it's fiction. But in a moment of fear where you need to make sense of something, your subconscious is going to pull those screen memories as a potential explanation. And
Yeah.
so, like, you are already, everybody in our culture is already seated to turn numinous experiences into something frightful before they're healing or before they're, because that is what we have the most sheer volume of examples bouncing around in our minds of from every horror movie and every horrible every every contact event that's been reported to MUFON out of the ones that they choose to sell to the History
Yep.
Channel. And they only choose to sell the ones that are scary. So
Yep. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book Galithog the Gray's.
Oh,
we lost you again.
he's back in the Pleiades. I think it's because he's in the Pleiades. If he was,
So it's a lot of radiation.
well, it's the Palladians. They're no.
All right,
Okay.
we
Oh,
got a
really?
moment of mindfulness. Great. Um,
I was just
so
saying that I was just saying it's because you're in the Pallades and the Palladians are interfering. Is what's
yes,
going on.
the interference. Yeah, I wanted to share a bit of story around that kind of interference or whatever, and what led me to write the book Galithog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry. So that book was based on a term paper I wrote about geometry as a means for SETI or communication with extraterrestrials. So my idea that we've been talking about is that ETs might communicate through geometry, and that might come through UAP formations and pulsations, like I talked about with the Monroe Institute, or it might come through the body mark. So body marks has been associated with alien abduction forever. This is where it gets scary. So trigger warning. This is why I was scared of it, Kurt, from the 90s, is because I learned that space aliens could come and visit you at night, take your bodies, wipe your minds afterwards. You wouldn't know about it except for the scars that they left on your body from implants or biopsies or whatever. So I was absolutely terrified of it. The kind of body mark gave us sort of eerie kind of, ooh, this is real sort of feeling. And so when I started doing this work, I go, okay, my lived experience with hypnosis tells me this one thing. My lived experience with UFOs tells me this thing. Dream shamanism is basically the way to understand it. But what about physical evidence, right? Could that be a real thing? So I looked around. No, actually, that's not actually the case. That's not how it worked. I finished the book. I finished the draft for Missing Time Found. And the last chapter I drafted was about the collapse of the possibility feature, the possibility of the regression into the single, like the wave into the particle, the
Mhm.
missing time into the knowledge of that missing time thing, collapses possibilities. I came up with that idea or whatever, and I did recordings for each chapter, like presentations that I draft and I would transcribe those. So I did that recording. I went to bed. The next day I woke up, I went into the sauna. I saw a mark on my body that I went, oh my God, this is a body mark from the space aliens. Because I gave them permission to do a red grid mark phenomena, which is a grid pattern of red dots. They did not do a grid. They did a line of dots, geometrically proportioned. Looked geometry to me. It looked like geometry to me. I go, this is actually, it didn't look like a bed bug. It didn't like whatever. It was absolutely anomalous to me. It was associated with a powerful dream. And when I looked at it, I went, oh my God, this is the interference pattern you would see in a double slit light experiment. This is the response to the quantum dreaming hypothesis I put forward. They are fucking with me. They are effing with me. They are. The other side is just, they're watching me. They thought I was, they're, because I was just so floored about like how this is even possible. So that one mark, that kind of thing recurred a few times associated with powerful dream states and things like that. It drove my inquiry forward into these body mark evidences. So I tracked down all, like, where do we actually get the claim body marks are associated with alien abduction? Where does that actually come from? So I tracked that in the literature to the researchers who present these body marks and things like that. And so that I personally could go, is there actually literally a possibility of this physical interaction that I know of? Can I actually believe the researchers and experiencers who tell me that they've been abducted and their bodies perform these things? Is this actually a physical risk? And my conclusion in that book was it's really hard to tell. We need to respect experiencers' testimony, but everything I encountered can be interpreted through a kind of divination process, and that it is not necessarily direct evidence of scientific or medical hypotheses. So the demonstration for me was the researchers who put forward that evidence did so in a way that was non-scientific. And therefore the conclusions for me is that mostly this body mark evidence thing deals with things like entity encounters, sleep paralysis, misapprehension of natural events. The geometry that comes out of it is fascinating. I love that book, Alathog Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry, that I wrote in a channeling process. It's super weird and complex. It's probably the most advanced writing I've done on this subject. But I wanted to share that stories with you guys because it brought in that sense of the collapse of the wave function in a way that literally reduced my fear of these things. Like I would get crazy and sweaty and I would like not be able to do certain practices because I was afraid the space aliens were going to take me, leave
Yeah.
marks on my body, right? Like that. I didn't know that at the time. I was just compulsive for about 8 years around this thing, like a crazy person. And then now I go, oh, I was just scared
Yeah.
because I saw because I saw Unsolved Mysteries and John Mack on Oprah. Like that's about it. Like, so, yeah.
Um,
Wow.
okay. How did how did you get led to Enochian magic specifically? What which is from what I understand, like it's very involved and there's a lot of like furniture, like lots of
Yes.
little things that you have to have
Yeah.
to oh
Hang
you're
on a
like
second. Let me just. Oh, wait a second. Hang on. I'll just reveal some of that.
this isn't video recorded by the way, so you
Oh,
don't have
great.
to
Yeah.
yeah.
So behind, I'll just describe it. Behind me, you see the table of union. You see the great table of Nalvaj kind of above me. Here's a sacred cloth that's holding over the Sigilum Diamonth and stuff like that. I burned half my furniture because it was like intense to have around me. It is a very intense thing. Anyone who's called to it, I think, is called to it for very specific reasons. I knew about John Dee, I think, because widely read. In 2012, I started getting really interested in hypnosis and ET contact narratives because I was studying large scale dream stuff. So I was looking at all dream phenomena. That was a huge part of it. I was really interested in it. And when I was studying psychology, I realized I needed a practical way of working with people instead of just academic. So I studied hypnotherapy and I looked to John Dee as the precedent for missing time hypnosis and remote viewing stuff, even though he's
Mhm.
not represented as a hypnotist, even though
Yeah.
everyone goes, oh, Mesmer is the start of it or whatever. It goes like, no, actually, that's one subtype of hypnosis. Mesmer is the start of this other shamanic dreaming type of thing, seems to be more like D. And so I looked into D. I read a bunch of his stuff in 2012 through 2014. I went to Mortlake, his place in London, where he lived. I went to the British Museum to look at his furnitures and stuff. I did a whole dreaming process to dream in the footsteps of D in order to understand that. That was kind of how I
Hmm.
was working at the time. I got back from that trip. I had a crazy infection in my arm that felt like it was spiritually caused by that situation. I went to a shaman to close that up, and then I was like, never again, not doing that. See you later. I don't want to die. And so then in 2020, when I was working with Dan Berg and trying to figure this out, I did a CE5 experience. I go like, sorry about that. Did a CE5 experience with Dan Berg and a spirit came to me that identified itself as the spirit of John Dee, and told me I needed to do Enochian magic to understand this thing. Um, and that there was resonances between John Dee as a past life type thing and Edward Kelly and me and Dan and sort of stuff. I now understand these in much more complex ways. But at the time, it was the spirit of John Dee told me to do it and do it before the winter solstice. So I did it, and I ran those etheric. I did that ritual. I did a scrying, and then I wrote this book, the Book of Galactic Light.
So
Hmm.
you did the scrying the ethers?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. Yeah, I
cool.
did the calls of the aethers for the 30 days, and each day I did a different ether. And I recorded what I saw in the scrying session, and I recorded myself doing it. And I recorded the mirror in case something actually physically showed up. And I recorded two shortwave radios as part of a CE5 experiment. The
Wow.
two radios were tuned to the same frequency. It was like it was some sacred number that was also legally allowed to be on like the shortwave radio where I'm at. The idea was if one radio went off and the other didn't, it was anomalous communication. I don't believe the methodology was developed by CE5 practitioners, and I have methodological issues with it, but it did reveal phenomena to me, and it did produce anomalous phenomena. I personally believe the magic created. I changed the energy in the space myself in combination with the non-humans, but they used my body to do it, and
Yeah,
so it wasn't anything else besides that. So I have evidence for that in the videos, and that's part of the clicking of those radios is in part I developed the software to analyze that, which I use to analyze the UAPs. I haven't analyzed it more than going, oh, there's geometry in here. It looks this way or whatever. But yeah.
that's really cool. You said about like your impressions that they're actually using your energy, or you know, it's a co-creative thing. Like when you're meeting in that space, then like everything on both sides is sort of at the disposal of the other in a way. Like maybe not everything, but it's like there is a shared energy pool, to put it
Yeah,
lightly.
the instrument is always the human body
Yeah.
But then
in one way or another. Yeah.
like then in ceremony, like if you're asking a spirit for a favor, and you know offer them a candle and some incense, like that is physical matter that's being transformed into energy that you are providing as you make a request. So like
Yeah.
my experience with that is that not all the time, but in some cases, like that is actually feeding, like the request itself is bound up with the energy of the candle and the smoke. And it's
Hmm.
like, here's this package of stuff you can use to do this thing for me if you'd like, if you want to help me. Um, and I think that's really, really important and interesting to think with. Like, sometimes you might get them the message that you need to give more offerings if you want a thing to happen the way you want it to. And like, there are times when I think sometimes the being you're asking to help you is like basically I want to help you, but I have to like pay off these other beings. So you might
Hmm.
not even always know who's getting what you're giving. Like it might be so that your spirit can go bribe three more. Like
Okay. Interesting.
What the other thing uh other kind of tangential to that is that the human body is actually um and I had this realization that's like, well, I guess this is obvious, but it's one of those things where it's like you until you actually like the actual flesh and blood is just one component of it because it's actually the field and the magnetic energy and everything that's around you. So your body does not stop at the skin. It actually encompasses a fairly large area surrounding you. So I that in a sense they are also using your body's also being used, but not the flesh and blood even. Like
Hmm.
sometimes the magnetic and energetic, electrical, whatever. Like it's larger than just this.
Right, and that field being important, right?
Yeah.
It's like almost like the Venn diagram between your cosmic egg and that of the spirits are
Mhm.
commingling in that space where the Venn diagram overlaps is the place where the co-creation happens. Uh,
Yeah, there's no closed systems in nature, I don't think.
which this is why it brings me back to like I think there really might be some credibility to the idea that like orgon devices can increase contact experiences because you are creating like a separate field. Like you're already making a bubble. And so if you're making a bubble, then you are also engaging in that bubble and then another being comes in. There's more definition present. It almost feels similar to drawing a magic circle.
Yeah, I mean I think a lot about the offering energy too with the CE5. I know Dr. Greer, who popularized the method, like puts out a puja table. So they does this sort of offering thing. There's an incense and oranges sometimes. There's kind of an instruction to offer gratitudes and things like that. I know my own
It's just
like the
magic. It's just magic. Like
it's
Yeah.
just magic. I mean, it really is. But here's the thing that is concerning to me. So around the CE5 motive, right? So one of the things I've been tracking, right, is my interactions with Dan Berg, right? So my first missing time client introduced me to the practice of CE5 because he got into CE5, ended up like being part of Rob Freeman's world exploring tour. Like he ran a camera for him because Dan had this sort of predilection toward experiences and summoning. They call them super experiencers or antennae or something like that. So there's an understanding that some people have these psionic giftings to create these connections or whatever. Um, all that said is I ended up having a handful of CE5 experiences with Dan, like, and they would always be a little like the first one was great, but I spent every day walking a labyrinth in the spot we would do it. So I was intentionally offering energy. I did not do that for a couple other ones. And one time he like went to go scout the location for the CE5 and got into a dirt bike crack. The other time crashed, like broke his foot, whatever, went to the hospital. The other time he we were supposed to have a CE5, but he got like deep salmonella poisoning. And then the next time we did CE5, we did DMT and didn't see any things, but I did light, like lucid dreaming in that state. And then afterward, I went, wait a second, I did lucid dreaming practice under DMT on the top of the mountain where I did CE5. And I just gave this guy four of the books I wrote because he inspired these experiences. And I listened to Eric Wargo talk about dream loops on the way to that mountain and on the way back because of synchronicities. So I go, something actually is happening here by way of this offering energy. Dan's been offering energy through his accidents. He's
yeah.
been in a hospital for like 9 days before each of these events, and orbs show up. And what if, like, they go, actually, like, he needs to go into these weird out of body, out of whatever states. He does not know what he's doing, but he's naturally doing it because these events are being drawn together by some event, some ritual in the future that's sending its causes backwards in time teleologically, right? And he's naturally offering energy in the way that makes sense to him. Like he goes on a bike
Mhm.
ride, he does a stupid thing like eat old fish from the mountain store that's selling sushi for sale, right? Like, oh my God. And so that sort of thing, like, and I noticed that, and I noticed that these things need energy and stuff like that. They need offering. They ask for it. So in that way, I go, what is this offering? Like my life last summer that surrounded that C5 where we did the DMT and stuff like that, what gave so much energy to the rituals. Like I literally started that summer with crazy doll magic to resolve the issues of alien abduction. I asked to transmute it through doll magic, basically. And I gave offerings that were the deepest offerings I could. And that destroyed my, destroyed my professional life for a little bit or whatever. And also revealed all of these things to me, the true nature of the phenomena. And so I'm just riffing and agreeing with a sense of the offering and the magicality of it. And if we're not conscious about how it works, we will be unconscious about it. And if we're unconscious, we don't have choice, and we might end up in accidents or eating stupid fish or believing psyops, and they might be harmful to us in ways. So the bringing clarity is part of my mission around that, and that in part is sharing my stupid story a little bit about veering away from realms I'm scared of because of programming, UFO stuff, and veering towards things a little bit recklessly and finding my way. And I think I'm doing all right. I think I've kind of
I
landed in a spot of healthiness, and my wife's helping me out with stuff now, and I'm less obsessed about stuff, and it's I don't know.
well, I mean, I'm sure because you don't land at like nuanced, careful analysis without like suffering. Like you have to go through being wrong a lot to get to where I think, I know where I am, where you are, where Kurt is. Like we've all stubbed our toes a few times to get here, without falling into like certainty traps or anything like that. But I think it's just so good to talk to you. Like every time we've chatted, and I'm hoping that we will do more of these podcasts as things arise. Because we're already at 2 hours, and I don't feel like we've gotten close to all the things that we could talk about. But it's so astute that you notice that, and like the same way that you're like, oh, actually the methodology with regression can be a suggestion problem. Like the second you're talking about your friend getting hurt, every time these things would happen, I'm thinking like, just lean into it and give the energy up front. Like give the energy up front. Just you have to like, yeah. And that imagining people listening to like Stephen Greer and they just go out and they're like, or well, you said Stephen Greer actually does do offerings, but imagining someone who doesn't realize that's, people actually can go get hurt like your friend did. Like that's, if they're following the shitty advice of people who are like, yeah, you just go out and you just think about them for a while and they'll show up or whatever.
Buy the sushi for them. Don't eat it.
Yeah.
That might have been the solution there. Yeah.
I love the idea of Stephen Greer getting a box of sushi in the mail.
Oh my God.
Like he's mad enough as it is. Um yeah, I kind of want to keep this close to 2 hours because then we
Yep.
can post it to YouTube. And I think I think this is actually really important that some people hear this one. But yeah, any closing thoughts or anything we didn't get to that you want to add or
Well, I mean, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about all of this. We talked about Bledsoe and things like that, which has been on my heart. I've been sort of, as part of my inquiry, right? So I've produced this research. It's been a lot of work to produce the research that brought me through this inquiry that got me the data about Chris Bledsoe, and you can use that to understand the psyops. Like it's not an insignificant sighting. It was literally the climax of the UFO of God book. There's no other UFO of God in that book. This is the UFO that and the sighting that demonstrates the triumph of faith over science. That's what it was in the book. That's what literally that's what this sighting was for Chris Bledsoe and everyone there. And we have concrete proof it's Intelsat 29E, concrete proof that they've ignored it for years. I've been in conversation with them in over emails for years. Every single person in that thing I've sent an email to saying this is a message from aliens and also it's Intelsat 29E. And it's still no, the record's not corrected. Bledsoe's the advisor to this study. There's no one is talking about this. You guys have taken the most time whatsoever as anyone in the field whatsoever. Like, I can't believe it. Like, it's a major claim. It should be news. It should reveal that there's something there is very concrete. Like I have the documentation. It's been on my website. Some people visit it, but there's no real attention in the narrative about that and correcting it. So you guys are doing that. You're listening to it. And I just wanted to call that out because that's really for me, it's helpful in my journey, but it also is illuminating because, like, why aren't people concerned about it? Why are
Yeah,
you guys willing to listen and talk about it? So that gives me a clue in terms of how to navigate this dialogue. Because you and I, Brian, we've worked together, we've chatted a lot. You're actively working in a field that is based in like magical practices, and that gives you the capacity to identify and talk about these things in a way that nobody else is. And so that tells me something about the nature of the world and the nature of disclosure and the nature of how we might understand more. And that's looking at your practice and your conversations. So
for sure.
I just
And
want to call that out.
what you've presented was huge for me too, because like this set when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, whatever, it hit me like a bag of bricks because I had an experience not that long ago with my wife out back behind our house of witnessing a pretty standard glowing orange orb UFO. Uh, once it got close enough to it, the lights split into two lights and it became a physical airplane. It became an airplane in front of our eyes. It had no mass. It was a ball of glowing orange light that then turned into an airplane. And the feeling I got in that moment was someone laughing. It was like well, now you don't know anything. Now you
Yep.
can't tell even with your own eyes, let alone footage. And so I think that game-breaking sense of like you no longer have the tools to determine this. Your sight is not enough. I think that in conjunction with what you presented really nailed it down for me. Like Chris Bledsoe can be a shaman, a legitimate shaman, while still mistakenly pointing at satellites.
Yep.
And they're not mutually exclusive, and that seems to be the most important thing. If anybody takes anything away from this, is like false binaries are always going to be a trap when it comes to numinous phenomenon. Um, it's a matter of being comfortable, being uncomfortable with uncertainty. Yeah, but man, this has been amazing, and I hope everyone finds the hashtags because I'm sure UFO people typically don't listen to this show, but I hope that they find it. Um,
Great. Me too.
and
Oop.
thank you so much for coming and spending your time. And I really hope we get to do this again as soon as we come up with something else to talk about, or as soon as you have some groundbreaking research again that like no one wants to listen to. We will definitely put it out there.
That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah. And if anyone's listening wanting to connect with me, they can connect at dseti.org. They send me an email, daniel@dseti.org. Go to the website. There's ways to engage with me through education or session work or whatever. And a lot of content on the DSETI YouTube channel or the Dreamwell mobile app where I teach dreaming and stuff like that. So there's many ways to get to me. I love talking to people. And if you're listening and you're connected with Brian and Kurt, like and you have an experience you're kind of thinking about, you're maybe scared of UFO and want to see where this goes, just reach out. I mean, I've been doing donation-based work and stuff like that. So I just make it work for people. And I get really amped up when people like your audience reach out to me because it's such a pleasure to work with people who understand the like that, but also want to bridge it because there's a social activism type thing like this work I'm very apolitical in a way, but actually developing these capacities is a political stance and a political action that really stands for freedom and all sorts of stuff. So thanks for having me and talking with me today.
Yeah, and for anybody that's like maybe on the fence about it, like Daniel said, I've done sessions with him, and I was very impressed as someone who's done sessions with both magicians and shamanistic practitioners, and now an academic. I was like, this is very, very good, very legit. And I really appreciated your methodology, and yeah, it's just really good to talk to someone who has a higher education who can actually come on this show and not look down on us. Like, you know, that's a really cool thing to have. And it's super inspiring that like you're actually doing this through a university, doing some of this research through a university. Like, very cool. I typically say that most people talking about UAPs make me want to just break bottles in an alley somewhere, but you're among the two people at the moment that don't. Like you and Peter Gray,
Thanks.
whom I mostly don't necessarily agree with, but his discussions of Jack Parsons and NASA and like all very, very important and very important to have viewpoints that are not locked into materialistic, frameworks. Um, that was a mouthful. So yeah, anyway, hope y'all enjoyed the show and yeah, don't go yell at Chris Bledsoe. Just leave a message in the comments if you want to complain. Okay. All right. Thanks. And Daniel's contact info will be in the show notes, so just look there to get a hold of him. All right. Thanks. Bye.